He was not the first Iranian scientist to be assassinated in the past decade, but he was a pillar of Iran's scientific development and services for military and even medical purposes. Mohsen Fakhrizadeh was ambushed in a weekend mountainous resort of Tehran on Friday, the 7th of November. Drag America into an unnecessary war and get it to set the rest of West Asia ablaze too. And why? Just to hold on to your own illegitimate existence. It's not proven, of course, that said scientist was assassinated by Israel, but the evidence is tangible and the motive no secret. Why now? And will it have been worth the effort? For answers, stay with me, Leila Faramarzi, on Iran Today. It's probable that Trump will be a single-term president, and if Biden takes office in the coming months, as it is assumed by his campaign slogans, he might return to the Iran nuclear deal and try to make US's approach different to that of Trump and pick up talks with Iran. Now, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu has said loud and clear there must be no return to the previous nuclear agreement. What better motive for killing off Iran's elites and military scientists, especially with America on your side? Kill him off, provoke Iran, get America to counter-react, and there go any hopes for talks. Mr. Ruivaran is a Middle East analyst, always with historic detail handy to support his comments. Let's hear him out. The goal behind the assassination of yet another prominent Iranian scientist seems pretty straightforward. But what would you say it is?
There were two goals behind this assassination. It's a general goal that those seeking to restrict Iran's military industry have stepped in to turn their demands into an operational stage and thus assassinate the father of Iran's military industry. This has been a large-scale goal. The name of Mohsen Fakhrizadeh has already been mentioned by the Mossad and the CIA. The second goal was tactical. They seek to force Iran to make a rash reaction to this event. Basically, Mr. Trump is working with Israel to make Iran do something that would make it fundamentally impossible to return to the deal and prevent a possible Biden administration from returning to the deal.
President Trump has been using his first term's last days to impose a new sanction a week on Iran. That is all that much harder for a possible Biden administration to return to normalcy with this country. But be ready for an unexpected spin to the true story. Mr. Izadi here is Professor of International Studies.
I think Mr. Netanyahu is trying to do a favor for President-elect Biden. You know, they know each other for many years. Netanyahu calls Mr. Biden an old friend and part of his family. And what they are trying to do is to create a setting for when Biden becomes president to have against Iran.
So Israel is aiming to help the US bring a weakened Iran to the negotiating table. But what if they get more than they've asked for? Because attacking a fifth and sixth scientist on Iranian soil could provoke an Iranian attack on Israel, hence inviting US intervention in the region yet again. Iran has promised retaliation. It has retaliated in past against the US. Israel should be a lot easier. It's to be seen how and when Iran might do so as not to play into foul hands, however. Mr. Tajik joined us by Skype. To hear his experienced views is worth every moment of struggling with the connection.
With such moves, they try to force Iran to react. The next goal is to make Iran play into this scenario of the Zionist regime in Saudi Arabia and the Hebrew Arab faction. This will not happen. And naturally, the Islamic Republic will not set goals and actions based on the scenarios designed by others, but will act on its own plans to achieve its goals.
It is noteworthy that Iranian Parliament's first legal reaction to the assassination was to change the strategic action for lifting of sanctions single urgency motion to double urgency motion, with an absolute majority of votes on November the 29th, 2020, in order to speed up action. The motion had been presented earlier, passed on Tuesday, December the 1st, with 248 yeas. The motion has 9 provisions. Some important provisions are that the Nuclear Energy Organization must produce and store 120 kilograms of 20% enriched uranium annually, must produce 500 kilograms of uranium at different levels of enrichment for peaceful purposes once a month, and must reverse the Iraq reactor back to its pre-JCPOA condition. Also, the government is obligated to report in 3 months from the passing of this motion on the compliance of other parties to the JCPOA. Should results not be satisfactory, the government must halt of the additional protocol of the NPT. Ms. Fallahi of the Parliamentary National Security Committee explains further.
Regarding this double agency motion, I should say that we didn't propose it in Parliament on the spur of the moment. We had prepared it some 3 months ago, way before the assassination, as a reaction to the non-compliance of the 4+1 countries. It was approved as a single urgency motion, then after this unfortunate occurrence, we approved it as a double agency motion to expand our nuclear scientific capabilities. It is completely peaceful and in full compliance with the JCPOA's Articles 36 and 37. Should other parties to the deal not fulfill their commitments, we can also reduce our commitments as long as they have not returned to compliance. It is based on what those countries signed themselves.
The website Israel Hayom published a bold headline 29th November that read, "Iran's tough year makes the world a safer place." It refers to the assassinations of Qasem Soleimani and Mohsen Fakhrizadeh, both recognized as martyrs in Iran. Such headlines coming from Israel sound like confessions, especially because Benjamin Netanyahu in April 2018 did say, "Remember this name," referring to Fakhrizadeh as a target on the scientist's back. For a glimpse into the more credible accounts of how the crime actually happened, we've got Mr. Abedin here with us in the studio. Mahan Abedin is a political analyst for Press TV. Welcome to the studio. Thanks for joining the program. Do feel free to begin your account whenever.
On the morning of Friday, 30th of November, one of Iran's leading scientists and a pioneer in nuclear-related research was transiting through the mountain retreat of Ab Saad, situated nearly 100 kilometers east of the capital city, Tehran. While there are several versions as to what precisely unfolded on the main boulevard of Ab Saad on that fateful morning, the following account is the most credible. As Dr. Fakhrizadeh's car was driving down the boulevard, his car came under attack from gunmen mounted on 2 motorcycles, moving in the opposite direction of the leading scientist's car. As the gunmen on motorcycles approached Dr. Fakhrizadeh's car, they opened fire. Meanwhile, a semi-truck parked on the side of the road on Fakhrizadeh's side and packed with wood suddenly exploded. But the explosion was not as strong or effective as the assassins hoped. However, the explosion forced Dr. Fakhrizadeh out of his car, where he was struck by at least 3 bullets. One of Fakhrizadeh's, possibly traveling on a trailing vehicle, tried to shield the leading scientist, and he too was hit by bullets and gravely wounded. Following a short outburst of gunfire, the terrorists quickly fled the scene by traveling down the boulevard and exiting Ab Saad. Contrary to reports that terrorists had not turned off the small town's electricity supply prior to the attack, the explosion of the semi-truck knocked off the town's power for a brief period. Again, contrary to reports, there were no CCTVs in the vicinity of the attack for the terrorists to deactivate. The closest CCTV is in a square where the town's municipality is situated, and that's several kilometers away from the scene of the attack.
IRGC Chief General Salami implies the assassination happened days before the U.S. is driven out of the region, a year from the U.S. assassination of General Soleimani in early January this year. Here are a few lines of his statement on the Fakhrizadeh case. Our missiles and drones are locked on 20,000 targets. Only Israel knows who and where we might aim for. The second defense or reaction plan is to destroy thousands of carriers of tanks, planes, and equipment. No shot will be aimless and in vain. Surrounding countries. Any shot from any point in your countries will be the destruction of the whole area.
The war on Syria hasn't been fought just with bullets and bombs, but with words and ideas. This week we examine how Western governments regime change by staging chemical gas attacks and building a vast propaganda network. I'm Richard Medhurst, and you're watching The Communique on Press TV.
Israel is a prime suspect, not for no good reason. Israel has the capacity and has done it before. It also has a motive and has the US's blessing, as I said. I asked people from different walks of life how they felt about a prominent Iranian scientist being assassinated on his own soil.
Feeling of sadness, anger, and an obligation for me to avenge the blood of this martyr.
I just feel my condolence for such a loss, and I want to express my compassion to my nation, and our society is eager to retaliate. We just want to some retaliation in the same time, in the same way, at the same level.
We witnessed a cowardly assassination, and I think that the heart of every Iranian and the heart of every free man in the world was saddened. The Iranian people and the whole world condemned such acts.
The available evidence shows the enemies behind this incident were the Americans and the Israelis. We expect the government to fully identify the perpetrators of this assassination and to avenge this martyr.
It's noteworthy the Obama administration condemned Israel's earlier assassinations precisely because it knew the murders wouldn't set back Iran's nuclear program really, but would set back any efforts to negotiate a deal to curb the program. And now, to get back into that nuclear deal, if Biden wins the US election and takes office, he will most likely have to strongly communicate that Israel will incur costs if it continues to carry out attacks. The 2015 Iran nuclear deal was signed between Iran and the P5+1. That's the US, UK, France, Russia, China, plus Germany. The nation isn't totally unified in how it views the world, but anti-US sentiment among Iranians still definitely exists and is nothing new. It's not hatred for hatred. It began with US interference in Iran's internal matters even before the revolution. And in the past year alone, the Trump administration has reportedly run several joint sabotage operations with Israel against Iran's nuclear facilities. Also, to assassinate Iranian General Soleimani outside the Baghdad airport in January, the US relied partly on Israeli intelligence. And earlier this month, Trump himself reportedly raised the possibility of attacking Iran with his top national security advisors. And shortly after, US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo met with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Arab adversaries of Iran.
This is how they have failed to overthrow the Islamic Republic for the last 41 years. You know, they thought that having Saddam Hussein attack Iran militarily is going to finish the government here. And what they actually did was to prolong the life of the Islamic Republic by creating so many martyrs. And this is what they don't get. The culture here is a culture of martyrdom, a culture of resistance.
Here's what the people thought about whether the loss of another prominent scientist, perhaps the most prominent of those assassinated, would shatter the foundations of Iran's scientific advancement.
Certainly the scientists who have been martyred have trained many students to follow in their footsteps. Their blood will definitely help us to continue down this path with more strength.
Removing scientists do not lead to deletion of science, and that is the misperception that they have, and they do know that it just makes pursue knowledge much more than before.
What the enemies and ill-wishers of the Islamic Republic should know is that this movement and the progress that has been made during the last 42 years will not be stopped by such events, and we will continue on our path and progress further.
Mr. Ruivaron comments on how the murder might affect the nation.
One of its aims was to destroy the morale of the people. As we have seen in the past, society regrets the assassination of its own scientists, and I think this creates a spirit of frustration in society. The security organizations in Iran must act quickly and identify those involved in this crime and respond to them to combat the ecological impact on Iranian society.
Apart from the fact that Iran has perhaps hundreds of scientists and institutional knowledge enough to carry on regardless of any single scientist, Mr. Fakhrizade's importance is now more symbolic and less for current knowledge of the detail of Iran's present scientific programs.
I believe that knowledge cannot be assassinated. The nuclear or missile knowledge has been localized by Iranian experts. The killing of 5 other nuclear experts and scientists who were martyred before the signing of the JCPOA did not stop this. The Iranians have gained domestic knowledge that can no longer be stopped.
If it's even possible to excuse Israel's highly probable state terror with the Trump administration's acquiescence, if not complicity, there are those in Israel and the US who see the current maximum pressure policy of US sanctions and threats of attacks on Iran as the only route to stop Iran from expanding its influence, whatever that may mean. The key point is that they think Iran can be controlled by pressure and threats. The 5-year history of the JCPOA is enough to prove that theory miserably wrong. The one thing that got Iran to curb its peaceful nuclear program was civility demonstrated in signing that Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, or nuclear deal. In return for doing so, nuclear-related economic UN sanctions were to be Iran. But
they failed to defeat Iran in the fields of hardware and military capabilities, so they opted to focus on the field of software and chaos to eliminate the manifestations of Iran's power, which are its elites and scientists, by the most violent and brutal means, namely terror and assassination. At the same time, while respect for scholars, scientists and elites has a fundamental place in human nature, for this oppressive order, scientists are perceived as hindrances because they have the knowledge and the enemy knows that they can strengthen their nations.
If partnerships with Israel and Arab states such as Saudi Arabia are to be strategic to the US, I'd really reconsider those partnerships, because US strategic should make the US more secure, not less, to take a page out of responsible statecraft. Plenty more to be learned and more to be said on the matter, and for that I'll be back in no time. But first, a look at other media outlets to see what they have to say with Shahrzad.
Hi, I'm Shahrzad Manicheri, and we'll be reviewing the latest update on the assassination of Iranian scientists and futile attempts to undermine Iran's progress. Tasnim news agency states ex-CIA head warns of lethal retaliation after assassination of Iranian scientist. Former CIA Director John Brennan described the assassination of top Iranian scientist Mohsen Fakhrizadeh as an act, warning that this could risk sparking a wider conflagration in the Middle East. This was a criminal act and highly reckless. It risks lethal retaliation and a new round of regional conflict, Brennan tweeted on Friday. Iranian leaders would be wise to wait for the return of responsible American leadership on the global stage and to resist the urge to respond against perceived culprits, he added. In an article by Ruda, we see Bernie Sanders states, assassination of Iranian nuclear scientists, reckless, provocative, and illegal. U.S. Senator Bernie Sanders has described the assassination of a high-ranking Iranian nuclear scientist as reckless, provocative, and illegal, and a deliberate act meant to impair the possible incoming American president's foreign policy agenda. Top have not claimed involvement in the assassination. I have no clue who did it. It's not that my lips are sealed because I'm being responsible. I simply have no clue, Israeli Cabinet Minister Tzachi Hanegbi said. That's all for this segment. We'll see you next week.
Even after the United States of America tried diplomacy, Israel pressed the Trump administration to end U.S. participation in the JCPOA, and that it did in 2018. This meant UN sanctions were now reimposed and reinforced on Iran as US sanctions. Tensions between the two states escalated naturally, and escalation of tensions since have brought the US and Iran to war twice. Strategic partnership to serve one party. In case you're wondering why the US would serve Israel to the disadvantage of its own people, it wouldn't. It's doubtful it would. But Israel has hold over US presidents thanks to AIPAC, the powerful Jewish lobby in America, and now it has an Arab alliance to support it at this end.
به هر حال اینها یک اتحاد استراتژیک با هم دیگه دارن.
The US government and Israel have a strategic alliance with each other. Sometimes America's behavior goes in the direction that it is willing to suffer a lot of losses in order to save the Zionists. The Zionists, on the other hand, are assisting the Americans in the region. In the US strategy, its hegemonic step is defined by ensuring Israel's security.
I said some in the US, Israel, and its apparently newly allied Arabs accuse Iran of expanding its influence in the region. Iran is a millennia-old regional heavyweight and sees itself responsible for maintaining a balance of power in its own region. Do note, the US is over 10,000 kilometers far from this region, and well, how Israel came about and maintains its presence in the region. Israel is the decades-long entity that rests on occupied Palestine. Also, it's the only entity in West Asia known to have nuclear warheads, hundreds of them. As for its governmental terrorism, let's take a look at some faces from the past. 2010 saw Masoud Ali Mohammadi, a Tehran University professor, assassinated in a pinpoint blast. Also in late 2010, Majid Shahriari, who specialized in neutron transport, met the same fate. Assassins riding motorcycles planted and detonated a C4 bomb on his car door whilst he was driving. He was instantly killed. Fereydun Abbasi, his fellow nuclear scientist and professor at Shahid Beheshti University, also had a bomb attached to his car and detonated by the killers from a distance. But he and his wife escaped death. They were wounded. In 2011, Dariush Rezai-Nejad was gunned down outside his Tehran apartment. He was an electrical engineer, doctoral student whose work involved nuclear applications. No time wasted, in 2012 came Mustafa Ahmadi Roshan's turn. Motorbike riders attached a magnetic bomb that tore apart a car carrying him. He was a nuclear scientist working at Iran's main uranium enrichment facility in Natanz. Roshan was in fact set to attend a memorial for Masoud Ali Mohammadi, who was killed in similar fashion. After this latest assassination, it's more likely that should Iran return to the negotiating table, it will return stronger with more demands, not weaker. Thanks for joining us from the whole team. Do watch again at the same times next week and each week after. We'll also be doing a piece on the anniversary of the Soleimani assassination. Don't forget to leave your comments. Bye for now.